Greetings to all. I'm currently reviewing the questions and significant insights from our most recent Bible study session. During our last session, we continued our exploration of the book of Romans, specifically focusing on chapter 11, verses 11 through 24. Let's take a closer look at the text. Please pause the video now to read Romans 11 through 15. Let us now consider the following question. Paul mentioned the Gentiles as proof there will be a future for Israel. What does the Gentiles' witness contribute to Israel's future? Let's delve into the summary of this question. Walking into service on a Sunday morning, it is easy to feel like we are just part of a modern movement. Yet, the words Paul wrote to the Romans remind us that we are actually characters in a much older, sweeping epic. When we look at the 11th chapter of Romans, specifically verses 11 through 15, we find Paul grappling with a tension that still resonates in our pews today regarding the relationship between the church and the roots of our faith. He asks a piercing question about whether the people of Israel stumble so as to fall beyond recovery, and his emphatic answer is that their journey is far from over. Instead, Paul suggests that the inclusion of the Gentiles, that is, most of us sitting in the chairs today, is actually a strategic part of God's plan to bring Israel back into the fold. One of the primary reasons Paul identifies the Gentiles as proof of a future for Israel is the sheer logic of God's generosity. He argues that if the world was enriched, that the Gentiles received such immense spiritual wealth through what looked like a temporary setback for Israel, then the eventual full inclusion of Israel must lead to something even more spectacular. Paul sees our presence in the kingdom not as a replacement, but as a preview of a much larger restoration. He views the blessings we experience today as a mathematical certainty that God is not finished with the original branches of the tree. Reasoning that a God who can bring life from a stubble will surely bring a greater glory through reconciliation. Expanding on this idea, Paul looks at the dynamic of spiritual jealousy as a catalyst for future change. He openly admits that his ministry to the Gentiles is partly intended to make his own kin desire the spiritual inheritance they currently see others enjoying. By identifying the Gentiles' vibrant faith as a source of holy envy, Paul proves that Israel's future is secure because God is using the outsider to beckon the insider's home. It is a bit like seeing someone else enjoy a feast that was originally prepared for your family. Eventually, the aroma of the meal is meant to draw everyone back to the table. Beyond the psychological pull of jealousy, Paul identifies the Gentiles as proof of Israel's future by grounding his argument in the concept of life after death. He uses the profound imagery of reconciliation, suggesting that if the temporary casting aside of Israel meant the reconciliation of the world, then their ultimate acceptance can be nothing less than life from the dead. This suggests that the very existence of a thriving Gentile church is a living testimony that God specializes in resurrections. If we, who were once far off, are now alive in Christ, then it is certainly that those who were the original heirs will also experience a spiritual awakening. Our roles as Gentile witnesses contribute to Israel's future by acting as a living mirror that reflects the promises of God back to the people who first received them. We aren't just bystanders. We are the evidence that God keeps his word, even when the path to fulfillment looks winding and complicated. By living out the grace we have received, we provide the tangible proof that the covenant is still active and that the door remains open. Our witness serves as a bridge, maintaining the connection between the current age and the promised restoration, ensuring that the story of Israel remains a present-day reality, rather than a historical footnote. The essential takeaway for us to carry into our week is that our inclusion in God's family is never a reason for pride, but rather a call to humble gratitude and a reminder of God's relentless faithfulness. We must realize that we are part of a divine strategy where our faith is meant to be a lighthouse for others, proving that no one is ever too far gone for reconciliation. Just as we have been brought in from the outside, we are now the living proof that God is still in the business of bringing the whole family home, turning every stumble into a step toward a much greater resurrection. Let us direct our attention to Romans chapter 11, verses 16 through 22. Please pause the video now. Once you have completed reading Romans chapter 11, verses 16 through 22, kindly press the play button to resume. Welcome back. Now, we shall explore a pivotal question based on this text. Why are Gentiles tempted to be arrogant toward the Jews? How is this still true in the world today? Let us now proceed to examine the summary of this inquiry. Standing as a vibrant branch on an ancient tree, the modern church often finds itself admiring its own leaves while forgetting the depth of the roots that sustain its very life. The Apostle Paul offers a sobering reality check in his letter to the Romans, specifically in the 11th chapter, where he utilizes the power of imagery of an olive tree to describe the spiritual heritage of faith. He reminds us that if the first piece of dough is holy, the whole lump is also holy. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. The metaphor serves as a direct bridge between the foundational covenant made with the Jewish people and the wild branches of the Gentile world that have been grafted in through grace. It is a call to humility that resonates just as loudly in our modern sanctuaries as it did in the house churches of the first century. The biblical warning against arrogance is particularly relevant today because of the persistent temptation for Gentiles to view their inclusion in God's plan as a replacement rather than an extension. One of the most compelling reasons this arrogance persists is the historical distance and cultural detachment that many modern believers feel toward Jewish traditions. Over centuries, the church has developed its own distinct liturgy and vocabulary, which can lead to a subconscious belief that the quote new unquote has rendered the quote old unquote obsolete. When we lose sight of the fact that we are the quote wild unquote branches supported by a root we did not create, we risk developing a spiritual pride that suggests we are the primary focus of the story rather than the invited participants in an ongoing promise. Building upon this sense of detachment, a second reason for this temptation lies in the misunderstanding of grace as a badge of superiority. In the passage, Paul addresses the argument that certain branches were broken off specifically so that the others could be grafted in. It is easy for the modern mind to twist this into a narrative of merit, assuming that the church was chosen because of some inherent worthiness or better response to God. This perspective ignores the reality that the original branches were pruned due to unbelief and that the grafted branches stand only by faith. When the church treats grace as a permanent entitlement rather than a humbling gift, it creates a fertile ground for looking down upon those who were the original stewards of the oracles of God. Furthermore, the sheer visibility and global reach of the modern church can lead to a triumphalist mindset that ignores the enduring election of Israel. Because the Gentile church has grown to encompass billions of people across every continent, there is a recurring temptation to see this numerical success as a sign that God has moved on entirely from his initial covenant people. This institutional pride fails to account for the quote, kindness and severity of God, unquote, mentioned by Paul, where he notes that the same God who did not spare the natural branches is capable of dealing just as strictly with the grafted ones if they fall into the same trap of unbelief and pride. This creates a dangerous theological vacuum where the church forgets it is a guest at a table originally set for another. Recognizing these tendencies requires us to lean into the tension of being both secure in our faith and trembling in our own self-awareness. The kindness of God is our only standing ground, and that kindness is conditional upon our remaining in His goodness rather than our own self-importance. By acknowledging the Jewish roots of our faith, we protect our hearts from the rot of conceit and ensure that our worship remains anchored in the full scope of God's redemptive history. The essential truth we must carry forward is that the church does not support the root, but the root supports the church. To live out this passage today means rejecting any form of spiritual elitism and instead embracing a posture of profound gratitude for the heritage that allows us to flourish. Our mandate is not to boast over the broken branches, but to embody the mercy we have received, remembering that the holiness of the root is what defines the beauty of every branch. Let us now redirect our attention. Kindly pause the video. Once you have completed reading the passage, Romans chapter 11, verses 23 through 24, please press the play button to resume the video. Welcome back. Now, let us consider this question. Who is included as Israel in the phrase, quote, all Israel shall be saved, unquote? Let us now proceed to the summary. The concept of restoration is one that resonates deeply within our modern culture. If we are people obsessed with the idea that what is broken can be made new and what is lost can be recovered, when we look at the words of the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 11, we find a profound metaphor involving an olive tree that speaks directly to the resilience of faith and the boundless nature of God's mercy. He reminds us that if those who were broken off because of unbelief do not persist in that state, they will be grafted back in, for God possesses the absolute power to integrate them once more. This imagery suggests that no distance is too great for the reach of divine grace, and no history is too complicated for a fresh start. The logic presented here is both simple and striking, emphasizing that if it was possible for the wild branches to be grafted into a cultivated tree against the natural order, it is infinitely more logical for the natural branches to be returned to their own original root. Within our contemporary church context, this passage offers three compelling reasons why we must remain hopeful and inclusive in our spiritual outlook. First, it underscores the radical sovereignty of God, reminding us that transformation is not dependent on human effort, but on the divine capacity to mend what has been severed. Second, it serves as a stern warning against spiritual arrogance, as the modern believer is reminded that their place in the fold is a gift of grace rather than a birthright or a personal achievement. Third, it highlights the enduring faithfulness of God's promises, suggesting that the original covenant remains a vital, living foundation that God refuses to abandon. Understanding the breadth of this promise requires us to look closely at the phrase stating that all Israel shall be saved, a statement that has sparked much reflection throughout the history of the church. In the context of Paul's broader argument, this inclusive term refers to the, quote, remnant chosen by grace, unquote, encompassing both the Jewish people who recognize their Messiah and the full inclusion of those from all nations who have been grafted into the spiritual lineage of Abraham. It represents the ultimate completion of the family of God, where the distinction between the natural branch and the wild branch fades away into a single flourishing entity. This definition moves us away from narrow ethnic definitions and toward a grander spiritual realization of a people united by faith in the transformative power of the Spirit. As we carry these truths into our daily lives, we must embrace the key lesson that our God is a master of reconciliation who specializes in, quote, impossible, unquote, graft. We are called to view every person through the lens of potential restoration, knowing that the same power that sustains our own faith is actively working to bring every wayward branch back into the source of life. By grounding ourselves in this reality, we transition from a posture of judgment into one of expectant hope, trusting that the root is holy and that the final chapter of God's story is one of wholeness and homecoming for all who turn toward the light. It has been a pleasure to study God's word with you, and I eagerly anticipate continuing our journey together next week. We will resume our study in the book of Romans. The lesson plan for next week's class will be sent to your inbox on Monday morning, so please kindly keep an eye out for that email. If you are not currently receiving our emails or would like to be added to the distribution list, please feel free to reach out via the Antioch Fairfax Station, Virginia website at antioch-church.org. You can also locate the class facilitated email address in the video description below. Until then, may grace and peace be with you.